Well, a stark warning about Russia from Defense Secretary Ash Carter. In a speech to students at Oxford University, Carter said that Russia is undermining international order and the U.S. will not stand for it.
We don't seek an enemy in Russia, but also make no mistake. We will defend our allies, the principled international order, and the positive future it affords us. We will counter attempts to undermine our collective security and will not ignore attempts to interfere with our democratic processes.
Well, this comes after Hillary Clinton made some similar comments to reporters on allegations the Russians hacked the Democratic Party and may be trying to influence the U.S. election, a point we should mention that is not a fact yet. That's a question that's just been raised, but we don't know for sure. Our next guest says Russia has never stopped fighting the Cold War. He outed himself as a former double agent against Russia last year. Naveed Jamali is author of How to Catch a Russian Spy. You recognize him because he's on our show quite often, but you don't get to talk about your own personal story as much, Naveed. It's great to have you back.
Great to be here, John.
So tell us a little bit about the double agent stuff first, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Russia today. How did you become a double agent?
It's a crazy story, and it's as espionage goes, it's sort of a funny one. I wanted to join the Navy after September 11th, had a real, like many Americans, desire to serve my country, and applied, did not get in, was told, hey, if you pump up your resume, perhaps you can reapply. And I came up with this harebrained idea that through a family connection that perhaps I could help the FBI with the Russians. And I looked at it as an internship, and I approached the FBI and said, look, I'm running a small company. The Russians are coming here. Perhaps I can help you in exchange for a letter of recommendation. So that's how I got started. It's
an interesting backstory with your family. Your family ran a bookstore, and that's how the life of your family and the life of some specific Russians intersected. How?
Yeah, so my name is Naveed Jamali. I can't trace my lineage to the Mayflower. My father is Pakistani. They ran a small company in New York City on Columbus Circle, and in the 80s, the Soviets approached them and said, we want to do business with you. And 10 minutes after the Soviets left my father's office, the FBI approached and said, hey, that was a Soviet intelligence officer. We'd like you to help us with them by monitoring them. Just do business with them and let us know what they want. And so that went on for, if you can believe it, almost 2 decades.
Wow. So what was your work like?
Very clearly, the Russians, this was from 2005 to 2009, the Russians approached me with the intention of recruiting me as a spy. They knew I was applying to the Navy, and they're in this for the long haul. They're a very, methodical and sort of deep-thinking organization, and they saw me as an asset they could recruit and, just like my parents, help them for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Very interesting. Again, How to Catch a Russian Spy is the book that you wrote about this. It's my understanding to be hopefully made into a movie as well. John and I are available if you need a television anchor to play in the movie. Just want to put it out there in the middle of our interview.
Sure.
Naveed, I'd like to take your experience working with the Russians, and there's a lot more there that we could go on for hours, and believe me, I'd love to talk to you more about that. But take your experience and apply it to what we see today. Because this is fairly recent, your work. And so when you're watching the actions of the Russians, we just had the breaking news this hour, a Russian plane buzzing one of our spy planes, questions about whether Russia is interfering in our election process. What goes through your mind as somebody with your experience?
Look, I spent 4 years essentially undercover, in very intimate, discussions with these people. And what I can tell you, and growing up with this, is the Russians, look, the Cold War for them never ended. When the Russians set foot in JFK as diplomats, they view themselves as being behind enemy lines. Their goal was, with me at least, was to collect military-grade intelligence. And the only reason you collect military-grade intelligence is because you're looking to defeat, well, a military adversary. That has not changed. That has not changed from the 80s on to present. And in fact, I think with Putin in power, and this isn't a Democratic or a Republican thing, Putin has, eyes to expand, and he views the contraction of the United States as an opportunity for him. So, they're a foe of ours. They view us as an enemy. I mean, make no mistake about that.
Let's play then, as again, the theme of the day is national security. You have both candidates talking a lot about national security. So I want to play a little sound from Donald Trump. Here's what he just said about Vladimir Putin and Hillary Clinton.
Russia has defied this administration at every single turn. Putin has no respect for President Obama and has absolutely no respect for Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton's being very outspoken as well, saying that Trump wants to make Vladimir Putin a friend, and she doesn't like that. In fact, there's a tradition that happens on a plane where the press corps is usually traveling, and what happens is you roll an orange with the question to the candidate, and the candidate rolls that orange back. And she was asked, who would you rather have dinner with, Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump? And the answer that came back was Vladimir Putin, which gives us an idea of how Hillary Clinton feels about her opponent. Does either candidate, in your mind, Naveed, have it right when it comes to Russia?
Look, I'm glad to hear Donald Trump is saying that. I think, as I said, this isn't a Republican or Democratic question. The Russians are in it for Russia. You know, they view any discord, any domestic discord, as an opportunity for them. And look, whether they directly interfere with the Democratic National Committee or anything like that, or the RNC or anything, is less of the question. The point is, they're very happy to see us with domestic squabbles. That is a benefit to them, and certainly the contraction of our prestige abroad is also a benefit to them. So I have to say, I'm a little worried about the connection between Manafort and Russia, but it is disturbing. The Russians are clearly looking for an.
You helped take down this spy ring in New York City through your contact, and you were able to break it up. And so I know that's a microcosm of a macrocosm, but just play it out. How do we beat the Russians at their own game? How do we win?
Yeah, absolutely. First thing is to acknowledge that they are, in fact, an adversary, which both candidates are doing. Russia is, look, we're not going to come to blows with Russia. We're not going to start a war. I mean, no one wants that, and the Russians either. But they're in New York City right now. My Russian spy handler, Oleg Kulikov, has since been replaced, and I guarantee you they're up to their old tricks. The good news, Jenna, is that the FBI and our intelligence services really are good at what they do, and they're really good at winning this. Look, my story is actually a story of beating the Russians, and I know every time I come onto the news, the Russians, they're not very happy with me doing so.
I was curious about that. Are you worried about a van sitting outside the studio? I'm kind of worried about you, Naveed.
Well, the running joke, Jenna, was when I wrote this book, I asked a bunch of friends at the intelligence agency, and they came back and said to me, you don't have to worry about the Russians. If they want to do anything, they'll subcontract out to the Bulgarians. So their sort of running joke was no Bulgarians. But no, look, they are very much, exactly, they're very much in it to win it. And, they're going to use any words that they can against us, whether it's from Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And they've done so pretty effectively up until now.
Well, it's a fascinating story, Naveed. Next time I'm going to call you Green Kryptonite on the air, because apparently that was one of your code names. We'll save that for our next conversation, but a fascinating perspective, and we appreciate it. We look forward to having you back as always. Thank you.